So R3 was just announced by Canon. We actually had a hands-on earlier here today in Singapore. Unfortunately, I do not have the camera with me in hands. The rules and regulations from Canon Singapore are very different from what you're gonna be seeing on the web from probably Canon USA or Canon Europe or other countries out there. We had hands-on in the office. We were not allowed to take any photos with the camera. We could put on our SD cards. We could not take any video footage to show you anything like that. So basically we could just walk you through our experiences, and of course we do have some B-roll to show you how the camera looks, how it compares to the 1DX3, and of course what it feels like in my hands. So I'm gonna give you some of the points that I experienced with the R3, what I liked, things I wish could be improved on it in future firmware updates, and of course my overall thoughts. So let's talk about the all-new Canon R3. Okay, before we get into things, I do want to let you know we are not paid or sponsored for this video. My thoughts only. So let's talk about performance, because this is going to be the question most of you are going to be asking. Does it hit 30 frames per second? And I'm going to say yes, it does on most of the RF lenses. Now, there will be a list of lenses on the website. We don't have that list currently right now, but from what the Canon representative did tell us, most of, or if not all, the RF lenses will achieve 30 frames per second. I think the macro lens maybe not, but the rest of them should hit thereabouts. It's a very fast camera overall. I think that's the one thing you're going to walk away from this, is that this really replaces the 1DX3. The 1DX3 now is going to be the last of the great DSLRs in my personal opinion. It's a fantastic camera. I enjoyed using that camera, but the R3 trumps it in every which way. I would say the only way that the 1DX still maintains an edge over the R3 is in terms of build quality. It feels like a piece of solid metal, where the R3 is much lighter in weight and it's a bit smaller. But I mean, if I was in war, I would take the 1DX with me. If I'm just gonna walk around the neighborhoods or gonna do some sporting events and it can take a little bit of a beating, then I'll take the R3 with me. So that's really the big difference between the two, but the R3 specs wise just blows it out of the water. In terms of write speeds, it comes CF Express Type B, and of course you have a UHS 2 card slot in it. So you're gonna maximize the performance on this camera with CF Express Type B. So do take a note of that. It is blazing fast. You're not gonna hit that 30 frames per second without it, so don't try it. You're gonna have to invest in that card sooner or later, but trust me, once you do, you make that jump, you're never going to go back to UHS 2, to be honest with you. It really is that good. So besides the very quick autofocus, you also have this new feature called Eye Control AF. Now, this is something new that we've never seen in an R series camera, or any camera for that matter. It's something that I think Canon is exploring, and it's interesting because you have to calibrate your eyeball, and the way you do it is you look into the EVF and you look at various different dots or circles at 12 o'clock, 3, 6, and 9, horizontal and vertical. And once you do that, wherever your eye looks through the EVF, there is a circle that moves around, and that sort of pinpoints where you want to focus at. Now, this is a hit and miss feature, to be honest with you, and it's still, all we were using here was pre-production. They were saying the firmware was pre-production on this. I didn't find it to be that accurate. As a matter of fact, I found that the camera recognized faces and eyes much faster than me looking at the person. So I would say this is more of a quote-unquote gimmick at this time than anything else. Can it improve with firmware updates? I'm sure it can, but there's so many different variables. Every person's eye is different, how people look around, and you know, as photographers, we're always looking around the scene to see what's behind us, what's around our subject, and that can really cause a lot of issues. So personally for me, this is not a feature that I would use, but the autofocus on the camera is so good that you really don't need it anyway. I think it's just there for more bragging rights, and maybe over time it will get better, but as of right now, you don't really need it. Also, let's talk about the shutter speeds on this, because it is an electronic shutter. It's a backside illuminated CMOS sensor on this. You can go up to 1/164,000th of a second. Okay, so you are really going to stop motion. You're not going to get that warped image that you see on some electronic shutters out there. It's very reminiscent of the Alpha 1 or A9 II from Sony. I would say it's more in line with the A9 II, slightly right in that ballpark. I don't know about the Alpha 1 because I don't have a camera to compare it, but from the images that we did see, from the test images that they showed us, at least, that they've taken, it looks great. No issues at all with that. And of course, you can go silent, or you can hear a little bit of a shutter sound, so you can turn that on or off. ISO can go up to 102,400 thereabouts. You can expand up to 200,000 thereabouts. Again, You're never going to use 100 and 2000 for ISO, but it's there. They're just touting the great low light performance, and with a backside illuminated CMOS sensor, you're going to get great low light performance on this. ISO is really well controlled for a 24 megapixel sensor on this. Now, speaking of the 24 megapixel sensor, Canon is touting that this has better resolution than their 30 megapixel sensor that was in the 5D Mark IV or even the EOS R for that matter. We don't have a camera to compare it. I asked them for sample images to show me. They couldn't provide any, so we're just going based off what they said. But for reference sake here, when I did test out the R6, I did find that even at 20 megapixels, it seemed to perform like a 24 megapixel camera. So if we're going to compare that, then I would say it's roughly around a 30 plus megapixel in terms of the resolution that you're going to get out of it, or at least how it looks for that matter. So don't worry so much about the 24 megapixel size of it. It's the image quality that counts, and I think Canon has done a great job based on the sample images that I saw. Now let's move on to the ergonomics of the R3. And it is smaller than the 1DX. It's more compact, but it feels really good in the hand, and it's actually a very light camera. When you first look at it, you're going to think that this camera may be heavier and bulkier than what it is, but it's not. It feels very good. They really concentrate on the ergonomics, the vertical grip as well as horizontally. It feels fantastic, and the button layout is very similar to the 1DX3. So if you're a professional and you want to move into mirrorless, you don't need to worry about sort of that, rememorizing where the buttons are at. It's a seamless transition, which is a welcomed addition that Canon has brought to this, because sometimes with newer cameras, you have to relearn buttons, relearn placement of all that, and it's pretty much based on memory. You can just feel the camera and you know exactly where everything is at. Another big upgrade they gave to the body is a flip-out rotatable display, 3.2 inches, 4.15 million dots. It is high resolution. It is beautiful to look at. It is touch interface. You can really zoom in on your subject and you can really know if you nailed focus or not. Love this display, and I wish more cameras in this segment would include a flip-out rotatable display at this high quality like Canon has. Let's also talk about the multifunction Hotshoe on this, because they're also sort of really challenging Sony in this regard. You can incorporate a microphone into this. On top of that, you can incorporate the flashes so they can sync to this. There's a lot of things you can do with this multifunction Hotshoe. They have released some accessories for this. There will be more coming in the near future. We weren't able to test much of them out, but it's a great attribute, and I actually like the cover they put on it. It actually looks really cool. It's this rubber cover, gives it a much more of a sleeker look than that plastic piece they usually put in a Hotshoe. It protects all the coverings on it. It is nice. Battery life uses the same battery as the 1DX3 and 2, so you're good in that regard as well. No issues at all. You can actually charge the battery the same way, or you can charge it via USB-C. Unfortunately, though, you cannot charge the camera while it is on. So let's say you want to record video like we're doing now on the R5. I cannot plug a USB-C cable in there and keep the battery charged as I'm recording or doing live streaming. You are reliant on the battery inside the camera. This is a misstep in my personal opinion with Canon. They should allow this. People do use their cameras nowadays for live streaming or for long form video. This would be a welcomed addition, so hopefully they can include this in a firmware update. Now, speaking of video, let's talk about video performance on this. Now, this can shoot up to 6K 60 frames per second internally, 4K 120. It does oversample to 6K thereabouts, so you are good in that regards. Video looks great. Now, I did talk about runtime because R5, not the greatest with heat management. So Canon did say that when you do set your temperature management control to high, you can achieve up to about 1 hour recording on 4K. And again, we didn't test it. We didn't have the luxury to test it. We're going based on what they're telling us thereabouts, but they did say it is much better than the R5. And of course, with the body, the way it's designed, you are gonna get, it looks like it's gonna have better heat management anyway, because it is a much larger camera than the R5. So, in that regard, I think for a lot of videographers out there, you don't need 8K. Most of us don't need 8K, and 6K is plenty for what we're using nowadays anyway. This is going to be a great camera for the videographers out there. So you are going to get that better battery life. You can shoot 4K longer. So I think for a lot of videographers out there, they're going to enjoy this camera in that regard. Also, you can shoot C-Log 3, and it will match with your various other Canon systems out there. So if you want to use this as an A cam, a B cam, or a C cam, you can put all those cameras together, C70, C series camera, R5, R6, R3, put them all together, and it's going to be a seamless transition in that regard. IBIS, inside of it, same as the R5. You can do up to 8 stops if you have an RF lens lens with image stabilization inside of that as well, so that's a great attribute. They were showing us images handheld at 3 seconds that were tack sharp. That is very impressive. And for my personal testing experience with the R5 and R6, the IBIS is some of the best I've used in any mirrorless camera system, so I definitely believe them in that regard. Now let's talk about the EVF. Now the EVF is actually one of the more welcomed addition to this camera that I liked. It's large. If you're wearing glasses, you're gonna really like this EVF. It protrudes out a lot, so your nose is not gonna hit the screen or accidentally touch something on the screen. And it's very large and comfortable for your eye. And it has a 5.76 million dot EVF in it, so it's in up to 120 hertz refresh rate on it. So it is smooth. This is a beautiful EVF, very reminiscent of the R5. It is in the R3. So if you're into sports photography, wildlife photography, or any sort of fast action photography, you're not going to miss that optical performance that you would get at, let's say, the 1DX. At this resolution, at this frame rate, you are going to be more than happy with it. Let's speak about something in terms of sports photography for a moment, because this is where this camera is kind of aimed at. Now, with this great eye tracking autofocus, there is enhanced tracking with subjects. So you can do animal, bird, people, cars, and helmets. So actually this is very interesting. So if you're going to be capturing motorsport, MotoGP, Formula One, and you want to capture the driver, this camera will actually lock on and look for it. Now, based on the test footage that they showed us, it works well. But in terms of my personal experience, I wasn't able to test this with a car on the track or any sort of sports for that matter. But if there is any consolation for that, when I tested the R5 and R6, when I did shoot sports or animals, it's some of the best tracking that I've seen in any mirrorless camera system out there, rivaling Sony, sometimes bettering it in some aspects. So they say the R3 is slightly ahead of the R5 in that regard. So I'm excited to try this out when we get a unit in our hands for full review. So let's talk about price for a moment. This camera's coming in around 6,000 US dollars, 5,999. Now this really puts it along the lines of, you know, the top end mirrorless camera systems out there. Yes, it is less expensive than the 1DX3, which is odd because this really replaces the 1DX3, but that's neither here nor there. Canon has their own thing with the 1DX, and I get it because the one is their flagship, and this is not considered their flagship yet. They've kind of hinted towards the R1 in the future, but anyway, that's a story for another day. But this really is coming close to the Alpha 1 from Sony, and I think this is going to be a very big challenge for Canon because this camera doesn't come out till November. Now, between now and November, we also know that the Nikon Z9 is going to be coming out, or we think it's going to be coming out, right? So then you're going to have an R3, a Z9, and the Alpha 1. These will be the three big boys out of the mirrorless full-frame camera market, and they're going to be right in there. But the Alpha 1 right now is about 6,500 USD, and you can get it a little bit cheaper depending on the shop that you get it from. Slight discount, and this is coming around 6,000. 24 megapixel up to 30 frames per second camera, 50 megapixel up to 30 frames per second camera, 8K video, 6K video. The R3 is a kind of a monobody with a built-in battery for the vertical grip. The Alpha 1 gives you the option of having that vertical grip on it or not, and also the extra batteries to it. So it does make it a very interesting decision for buyers out there. Now, if you're in the Canon market, you own Canon glass, the R3 is a natural progression for you, okay? But if you are not a Canon user and you're deciding between two camera systems, it does get very interesting. Now, I will say that from my experience with the R3, I did find that the user interface is much easier than Sony's. I found that the button placement was a lot easier for me to navigate and things just worked. It just made more sense in that regard. But you can't discount the technology and what Sony has done with the Alpha 1. And obviously, you know, as cameras stay out in the market longer, prices come down a little bit more, there will be incentives from all these camera manufacturers. So it's going to be a really tough decision for a lot of you photographers or videographers that need a camera system like this. Again, these cameras are not for everyone, right? These are mainly geared towards sports, wildlife, you know, fast action photography, and some videographers that need that extra battery life. You're going to go for something like the R3 and the Alpha 1 because you can have the vertical grip on it as well. But it's going to be a very challenging thing. Personally, I would have wished they Canon dropped this camera to around 5,000 plus, thereabouts, USD. I think it would have been much more competitive in that regard, and it would have really enticed a lot of buyers to actually give the Canon system a try. Because here's the thing, there is no third party, really no third party RF lenses out there to match what Canon's currently got. It's not like Sigma and Tamron are making lenses right now. Maybe they will in the near future. But with Sony, you've got Sony lenses, you've got Sigma, you've got Tamron, you've got a variety of different third-party options out there. So as a user, you maybe don't need to buy the most expensive, G Master glass. You can buy something a little bit less expensive, but with Canon, you're pretty much stuck with their RF lenses, which come at a premium. Yes, they did introduce the new 100 to 400 and the 16 2.8, which are a much less expensive lens. They do have some, more budget-friendly lenses in their lineup, but for the most part, you are really going to be paying a premium for the lenses as well. So something to take consideration for when you're looking at this camera system. But overall, I did like the R3. It's a little disheartening that we weren't able to actually take the camera out, try it out, show you some sample images. Even though this camera was used in the Olympics, they had pre-production cameras in the office and they didn't want us to do that. So it's just me talking to you guys. But anyway, I hope these points help you in your buying decision. If you're going to pick up the R3, if you're going to wait. Anyway, I liked it a lot. I think it's a great camera system. A little hesitant on the price. Eye control AF, but I think Canon's got a hit on their hands. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the camera. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. Like always, follow us on Facebook, subscribe to us on YouTube. Like this video, helps out our channel a lot, and we'll chat to you soon. Take care.